Yes, this is kind of a last-minute deal, so I hope you'll bear with me on that. This is the last part of school, you can tell. I got an email from a student the other day that very impassioned plea. He said, I've missed your class some, but I've learned a lot. He said, I'm the risk management chairman for Sigma Nu, and I've learned a lot about public relations in that role. And so he said, this is really kind of like a Hail Mary. And he spelled it M-E-R-R-Y. Very high caliber student. And I thought, well, you know, this is something someone sent me that's kind of interesting. It's called, and that's how the fight got started. One year a husband decided to buy his mother-in-law a cemetery plot as a Christmas gift. The next year he didn't get her anything. And when she asked him why, he said, well, you haven't used the gift I gave you last year. That's when the fight started. My wife and I were watching Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, and we were in bed, and I turned to her and said, do you want to have sex? No, she said. I thought a minute, and I said, is that your final answer? She said, yes. He said, well, would you mind then if I called a friend? And that's when the fight started. There are some silver keys in the audience, are there not? Yes. I thought so. So you guys can correct me on some of this, I'm sure, because you were there and experienced it. What I've done is gone back and done a little bit of research, and of course, as you'll remember, JC spoke at Founders Day about 4 or 5 years ago, and I have his notes from that presentation, and so I'll share some of those with you. And David Nail, who was I guess he was a fraternity advisor, associate dean of students about 10 years ago, wrote a history of the Greek system at Texas Tech. And so I'm sharing some of that information with you. And also, as you know, I have written a history of Texas Epsilon. It's about 160 pages, but I keep adding to it. If you're interested in that, there's a copy of it in the lodge. Now, I don't know what the people who commissioned me to do this, and that would be T.O. Clayburg and Mickey McKenzie and John Scoble and Robert Gossett. I don't know what they plan to do with the manuscript, but it seems to me like it would be a great fundraiser. If we could add some things to it. And there's probably quite a bit more that could be added. But they called me that Saturday night and said, from Rio Dosa, when they were all drunk, I guess, and said, we've taken a vote and we elected you to do this. And I said, well, in my spare time, I'll try to find time to do it, which I did. The Silver Key Club was organized on October 12th, 1929. Quote, for the purpose of promoting a closer feeling of brotherhood among its members and to uphold the principles of democracy on campus. It was the second social club organized on campus, and some of their activities. They had an annual reunion in Mexico City. Did y'all go to that? Remember that? They had in the fall a dinner dance to honor new members and pledges. They had a homecoming banquet to honor Silver Key X's. Had a Christmas dance. They had a spring dance in March, a farewell breakfast to honor graduating members. And so it really wasn't a whole lot different from kind of what we do today or we've done over the years. John Harding and Bob Renner, who I'm not familiar with, was listed as their original sponsors. Now John, according to my research, really didn't get involved in this club till about 1937. And was his advisor. It was the advisor, of course, until 1953, when we became Phi Delta Theta. And apparently the Silver Key organization operated pretty much like Texas Epsilon. They had campus leaders. They were good in intramurals. They were decent in grades. They hazed the hell out of their pledges, at least according to some stories I've heard. In fact, in those days, they used a paddle. Is that right?
Oh, boy.
Yeah. by the time I pledged, they had done away with the paddle, fortunately. But apparently, the point is, apparently they were a leading club on campus. They did the kinds of things that we've been noted for in Texas Epsilon. In the late 1940s and early 1950s, Texas Tech began to consider admitting Greek letter organizations. You know, at that time, we started as Texas Technological College with an emphasis on agriculture and engineering. But as the years went by, the largest college was Arts and Sciences, followed by business. And so, as many of you guys from the past know, there was a pretty bloody fight over actually what to call this institution, because in the eyes of the faculty and students, we were becoming a multi-purpose university, not a technical college for agriculture and engineering. And faculty members complained that it's hard to recruit faculty to come in arts and sciences or business to a technological college. So this was in the forefront of the movement that ultimately resulted in Texas Tech University. And Clifford B. Jones, who was at that time president, said, quote, "If we are to become a multi-purpose university, we need national affiliation with Greek letter organizations, which is very commonplace with the major universities that we compete against." And so the ball was rolling. It wasn't a done deal. There was a lot of controversy over it. Apparently the Toreador, the student newspaper, wrote an editorial and said this was a bad idea because if we did this, Greeks would become snobs and elites on our campus. But however, those guys, a lot of you remember James Allen. James G. Allen, the infamous Dean of Student Life, who had his fingers on everything.
He was an SAE.
He was an SAE. But you know what I found out? And I didn't know this. I was shocked, in fact, to find for a period of time, he assisted John Harding in sponsoring Silver Key. That was a revelation. Dean Allen was, you know, I'll give the guy credit. He was pretty far thinker in terms of what the campus ought to look like. And he pushed very hard for Greek letter organizations. To tell you how he operated, I don't remember whether I was president or Ray Gressick was president or somebody. We got a letter from him that said, "Your warden has not made a 2-point this semester and you're going to have to need to replace him." Can you imagine getting a letter like that from the dean of students? He was really, like I say, he was on top of everything, he had his fingers into everything. But he was very instrumental, I think, in pushing for fraternities and sororities. And so finally, the board of directors, as they were called, voted to do that, and it was not unanimous. There were a couple against it, but it passed with the provision that there would be no fraternity housing. Now, depending upon your point of view, but from the standpoint of a chapter advisor for 37 years, I think that was a good idea. You know, not having to supervise the activities in a house. Plus the fact that, if you stop and think about it, I think the fact that we haven't had fraternity row, so to speak, like, you know, the SMU or Texas, probably has contributed to a better Greek feeling on our campus. I don't think it's quite as anti-Greek maybe as you find some places, because, you know, our pledges live in the residence halls with everybody else. And there's no fraternity house, and it's not, you know, them out there on Greek Road. So probably that was not a bad decision. Obviously, as you know, they allowed us to have lodges, but Dean Allen had to supervise that. You could not, when we signed a new agreement, and we moved, as some of you remember, we moved all over the place, but we could not negotiate a contract with anyone to occupy a building unless Dean Allen had read it and approved of it, and inspected the property. So again, he was really on top of things. There were advertisements in the door from the Varsity Bookstore that announced the sale of local club decals and stationaries while supplies last. Our loss is your gain, they said. And then later on, they began to advertise that we now have fraternity decals in stock. So in the spring of '53, the club decals that had been on cars were replaced by Greek decals. And we began, of course, the sororities were first, followed by the fraternities. In the process, and by the way, I was not a Silver Key. And I wasn't there when all this took place, so this is kind of, some of it's secondhand, but you guys are welcome to fill me in. As I understand, it was similar to Rush, except you weren't rushing individuals, you were rushing organizations. Each fraternity had a meeting with the different social groups, and then there were 9 clubs, and they invited 9 Greek letter organizations to come to campus, and we'd have kind of we call them smokers in those days, although people didn't smoke at the meeting, but they would have these receptions, and we would go around and visit with each of the 9 Greek letter organizations that came in, and they would get their impression of us. There were a large group of Phi Delta alumni from other universities in this area. And that proved to be, as I understand it, pretty instrumental in our decision to select Phi Delta Theta. So in the spring of '53, this transition began to take place. We were in each organization, once they decided, I guess, who they wanted to ask, would petition that group with a fairly lengthy and polished petition. And they were presented, and I'm sure John Harding had a hand in this. And there's a couple of examples of that at the lodge. But we presented Phi Delta Theta with a 20-page document that carried the endorsement of all the Phi Delta chapters in this area, University of Texas, SMU, Oklahoma A&M at that time, which is Oklahoma State now. And they all sent delegates here to rush us and to represent the fraternity. And I guess it worked the same way with most of the others. But the local alumni group was headed up by a guy named Parker Prouty. That name will resonate to some of you. He was the editor of the Lubbock Avalanche Journal and a very, very outspoken individual. He was kind of a kingmaker in Lubbock. In fact, he was one of the so-called group kingmakers that met at the Hilton Hotel where they met, and they decided who was going to be mayor and who was, how things were going to run. And it worked pretty well, really. But Parker Prouty was very influential. And there were other prominent Amarillo alumni, an oilman named Lawrence Hagee, an attorney named Ben Monning. That name resonates with me a little bit. You may know him. Monning, that name ring a bell?
Wales Madden.
Yeah, Wales Madden was also involved. Wales Madden would later chair the state coordinating board for colleges and universities. A guy named Shelby Kritzer, who was the publisher of the Amarillo Globe News, which owned at that time the Lubbock Avalanche Journal. They were all Phi Deltas. And another very prominent person was E.W. Williams. E.W. Williams was president of the Citizens National Bank. And before he moved to Amarillo, and I guess was president of Amarillo National Bank, he was, I think was from SMU, and he was very active in recruiting our group. And as a kind of a postscript, a few years ago, he made a contribution of $75,000 to the general fraternity to create a whole man scholarship for this chapter. I'm not sure the local chapter is much aware of that. Of course, we've had other individuals that have done that. In fact, I think we have about 9 at this point in time. But he had a real affinity for Texas Epsilon. So, we were initiated in 1953, May the 2nd, 1953, and we were the first fraternity to be initiated on campus. Now, this is from J.C. J.C. was a junior when all this took place. He said we were rushed as individuals, like I said, not as individuals, but like a chapter, We went to rush parties, and they would wine and dine us and talk about their fraternity, give us a chance to talk about our club. We didn't really know much about nationals, he said. We'd heard the Sweetheart of Sigma Chi song, but we pretty quickly, and I'm quoting, decided that Phi Delta Theta was by far the best. Now, I've heard that there was some sentiment towards SAE, but I think the influence of these alums overrode that. And so JC says, we quickly decided that Phi Delta Theta was by far the best. The alumni from Lubbock were impressive, as well as those that came from other cities. Phi Gam's annual convention had not approved Texas Tech, so Phi Gam had to wait until the summer convention to get their charter. I guess that's probably one of the reasons we were the first. We had the first choice, I'm quoting, we had the first choice of all these Greek nationals, and we were the first to be installed on the campus. And he says, I know this sounds like bragging, but like Dizzy Dean said, if you've done it, it ain't bragging. Kamos, which became Fiji, was probably our second choice, although I did hear that there was some sentiment towards SAE. Now, the coup de grace. This is a John Harding special. The deal was that anyone who was interested in becoming a fraternity person could be initiated. So, Mr. Harding selected the who's who in Lubbock who were not affiliated with a fraternity, and we initiated them into Texas Epsilon. People like Roy Furr and many others. So, consequently, the cream of the crop in Lubbock, and for years and years and years, the leadership were Phi Deltas, because Mr. Harding had figured out, you know, this would be a plus for us in the future, and they all agreed to do this, including Dr. Clifford Jones. So, again, John Harding strikes. We were inducted and signed the bond on May 2nd. Mr. Harding was number 1 and I was number 2. It's not, he says, it wasn't that big a deal at the time when we only had about 50 members, but it seems pretty important today. Moody Alexander was number 3. Okay, and then from David Nail. The following fall, the men's social clubs were gone, and most all were preparing to become Greek-letter fraternities. The Interfraternity Council replaced the Men's Council and held its first meeting at the direction of Dean Allen and a new dean, Associate Dean James Whitehead, a name that will live in infamy. Any of you remember Whitehead? Well, I do. And I've got more to say about him in a minute. And anyway, this was on September 20th, 1953. The meeting represented a blend of the old social clubs and the new fraternities. As Adelphii became SAE, Kamos, Phi Gamma Delta, Centaurs became Phi Kappa Psi, the College Club, Kappa Sig, Los Camaradas, Pi Kappa Alpha, Socii, Sigma Nu, and the Wranglers became ATO. And in the spring of '54, the IFC recorded a very successful rush. They placed these fraternities placed 253 men. That represented 1 out of every 5 undergraduate males on campus. Now, the story says, but quantity was not quality. When the grades were released at the end of the spring semester, and I'm not sure how to interpret this, this is what it said. 6 in 10 men decreased their GPA by 0.43 on a scale of 3-point. So, obviously there wasn't a big emphasis on study halls and making your grades. They were on a 3-point at the time, by the way. That summer, Dean Whitehead prepared a rather detailed and dismal statistical analysis in hopes of establishing a deferred rush system at Texas Tech, whereby obviously you'd have to be in school a semester before you could pledge. His rationale was that a young man could survive the first semester. If he could survive the first, he would be better equipped to survive pledgeship. On September 30th, 1954, he took what he thought was a very well-reasoned deferred rush proposal to ISC, and it was defeated, and we voted against it. However, he was a very persistent man, I'm quoting, and he was a very persistent man. And finally, his deferred rush system came into being in an attempt to address the scholarship issue. And as you know, a number of you were under deferred rush, and then at some point in time, the ISC voted to go to the present system like the women and pledge in the fall. And my recollection of that was that that was passed by the small fraternities. SAE, Phi Gamma Delta, Delta Tau Delta, Fiji, and Phi Delta all voted against that. But the smaller fraternities, the rationale was that maybe they could increase their numbers if they could, you know, because if you're here for a semester, you figure out who the better fraternities are. And maybe the rationale, I think, was that we'll have a better chance. Well, it didn't work out that way because most of these rushies had figured out who the better fraternities were to start with. But anyway, the deferred rush system was put in place at that time. Whitehead, I guess looking back on it, was a good guy who was trying to do the right thing, but he was a dictator. He wanted to control everything, and I guess that stemmed from Dean Allen. But he was worse than Dean Allen. He was a very difficult guy to get along with. It was his way or the highway, and if the ISC wanted to do something, and they discussed it, he would weigh into the discussion and ultimately intimidate, I guess, some of them into voting the way he wanted them to vote. He was not popular. And when I was president of ISC, we decided to have ISC meetings without him. And so we would go off in someone's house or lodge or whatever and have our meeting and make our decisions, plan our votes, and then we would have a formal meeting with him. And he was unable in that way to convince people. We'd already made up our mind what we were going to do. And he did not like me very much when he found out that that was going on. But, you know, it was just a way, we felt like we ought to have the right as the IFC to decide these things and not be intimidated by this guy. But, you know, I think finally we parted friends, but it wasn't a happy marriage for a long time. Sigma Chi came along then, said, and I'm quoting, regardless of the initial poor academic performance, the tech system did not apparently want for members. Although the initiated variety was undoubtedly chagrined at the astonishing number of holdover pledges due to the lack of scholastic performance. Another 154 pledges were added in the fall of '54. ISC began to see the need of increasing its constituency. And so in November, the matter of expansion had passed beyond idle discussion, and ISC cryptically recorded in its minutes that, quote, discussion then centered around the possibility of a new fraternity being colonized on campus will not be in the minutes. The secrecy of the matter was urged, and until such time it was revealed that a newly organized but poorly disguised Chi Sigma social club finally was admitted on January 10, 1955 as Sigma Chi. Whitehead was a Lambda Chi Alpha, by the way. It says, by virtue of an honorary initiation, I figured as much because he probably wouldn't have been able to go through anybody's pledge. In September, Sigma Chi was admitted to make the 10th fraternity. And again, quoting from David Nail, so it came to pass by the middle of the decade, we saw the rise of Elvis and Fats Domino, that social clubs had died by a method of deliberate transformation. The little comings and goings which comprised the routine for their members for a quarter of a century were to be left behind, and yet in the misty mental hinterland where memory distills fact into tradition, The old social clubs retain their influence on procedure, on the ways and means by which the new Greek letter organizations operate. I think we would all agree that Greek letter organizations have made an enormous contribution to this university. The decision to admit them was probably a very wise decision, and like I said, I think probably the decision not to have houses also was probably a smart decision. But to kind of refocus and finish this discussion, we're living in difficult times right now. The political correctness crowd has taken over on most college campuses, including this one. And, you know, we went through that, and I'm not trying to defend what happened. You know, I'm certainly not trying to defend the sign that was put up. But both our international fraternity and Texas Tech way overreacted to that event. But it was because, and probably I've said this before, or maybe you're aware of this before, the Obama Education Department threatened, and that's basically what this letter was. It was a threat. It was called a college letter. That when someone complains about sexual harassment or sexual assault, that if the university does not take quick and decisive action, they're in danger of losing federal funds. And so universities run scared. And frankly, a lot of us couldn't figure out, okay, this was inappropriate. That sign we put up was inappropriate. But does it go to the length that they took it? You know, it's like due process doesn't figure into it. You know, due process is thrown out the window completely, and there are a lot of good examples of that. If you watch the 30-30 presentation about the Duke lacrosse team, what a great example that is. Or the situation with Phi Kappa Psi at the University of Virginia. I mean, individuals' lives have been ruined, they're tarnished for no reason other than the fact that the university overreacted. And so, you know, we caution our active members on a regular basis. Be careful what you do, be careful what you say, because those phones are out there and people, you know, record things, and you just have to be really careful. I mean, some of the things that were kind of routine for the Silver Keys and the early Phi Delts in my vintage would have us in jail today. You know, maybe electrocuted. I don't know. But we are certainly faced with a serious situation. And I don't know if that, you know, some people say, well, maybe the new administration will counteract that. I don't know. But there's some lawyers in here that can probably address that. But it's a bad situation. And we don't, you know, if something happens, we are guilty until we prove ourselves innocent, and not innocent until they prove us guilty. And I've had some personal experience with that with another organization that I advise, the Saddle Trans. And so it's just, you know, it is what it is. Okay, that's the best shot I can take at Silver Key. Dan?
Bill, you mentioned all those outstanding people in Lubbock that John Hardy lined up before all this really got going. In about 57 or 8, we came up with the idea of having an alum brother that each one of the members would go to somebody, because these guys really hadn't been activated into our fraternity. I mean, we just had them with, and so we then had a big banquet and asked all our big brothers to come. And I got to go downtown. Clifford Jones was the chairman of the board of Lubbock National Bank at that time, had his own office. And I got to go down there and I asked him to be my alum big brother. That's probably one of the highlights of my whole experience. Most gracious person I've ever known in my life. In fact, he even hosted when we were being rushed, his house opened it up. I remember going to his big old house on 19th with white collars, and that was quite an experience.
Well, one of the things that I try real hard today, with not a whole lot of success, is to try and impress upon our undergraduates the fact that Lubbock is important to our fraternity. We've had, over the years, we've pledged the best people from Lubbock every single year. And you can look around the community and tell that. They're not as into that as they used to be. Yes?
These people like Mr. Furr and Mr. Jones, they weren't students or just had become students. Basically, John Harding said, you and you are going to be affiliated with us.
They were pillars of the community.
That's amazing. I was going to ask you, how far behind was Tech to say Texas and other schools that had Greek organizations? Are we talking 50 years or 40 years? Or?
Probably in the case of Texas, at least 40 years, 50 years. And SMU the same. John?
Yes, Mr. Harding was especially astute leader. And Charlie Cannon showed me this list and I had to see it. And it starts with bond number 1 and he goes to whatever, through to 65. But if you read on the first page, the Martin Street of Rural,
Dunlaps.
Dunlaps. Okay. John would go out and find these gentlemen, and like I said, I'll never forget how they cherry-picked the very finest leaders wherever we could get them, and they became honorary members or inducted members.
Yeah, we initiated them.
Oh yeah, everyone is, R.H. Fulton was a person of some personality. Anybody here know what that means?
His language
Well,
is so bad. Company took his phone out.
Joe Kirk was.
We used his warehouse all the time, that was okay.
That's where my Hell Week was conducted. Fulton Warehouse. Lovely place.
So John Harding worked his way through the web of undesirables, and some name down here probably should have been erased. But in any event, he became a member. The Dunlaps, Ira, I got to go through here just, I won't bore you with this, but it's just amazing.
Yeah.
When I look back, it's been all those years I've forgotten that thing was so important for him, buildings,
And it set the tone for what it sure did. Charlie?
Well, I noticed, and looking at the inaugural class of Phi Delta Theta, you mentioned a minute ago, that Silver Key was about 60 members. There are probably 150 members of the inaugural Phi Delta Theta.
Right, because again, anyone who'd been to Silver Key could come back and be initiated. Plus, he went out and recruited all these guys who didn't have a fraternity affiliation at all. So, such is the legacy of Silver Key. Thank you.
I want one question.
Yes.
When you brought up this house deal, when I got here in '78, there were fraternities where Jimmy John's are, and they were living in those houses.
Yeah, but they didn't have 50 or 60 people living in them.
So you're talking about that
I'm
level,
talking about a big fraternity house.
like you see in the Big Ten schools and stuff.
Exactly.
Okay.
That kind of living was present at other universities at that time?
Yes.
This is the only place I heard.
And I think that's also where this snobbery and elitism came from.
Well, probably from Harvard and Ivy League stuff like that.
Well, SMU had a house.
So that housing decision was made by, was it Dr. Allen or?
It was made by the board.
Did
You
you
made
talk?
37 years as the advisor, had we lived in the house?
Yeah, Peggy would be the house mother.
Any thought of elitism would be banished immediately if a person would go back these many years and go to the pit down on 19th Street.
Yeah, it was a different day and a different time.
It was, and I think finally that house burned down.
Okay, thank you guys.